Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I'm Robert G. Been with the company in different capacities, probably 28 plus years. And today we're looking forward to sharing with you some tips and tricks. And Bob, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Robert. Appreciate everyone for hopping on. I'm Bob Cook. I work in the engineering department here as the engineering manager. I've been with Bestbath close to 9 years now. And with that, we're going to hop into installation instructions for a low threshold unit. All right.
Are you able to expand your screen, Bob? There we go.
You able to see it now, Robert?
Yep, that looks good.
All right. So as I stated, we're going to go through a low profile installation and our wall systems that go with that, mostly focusing on thresholds that are 1.5 inches and below. Those are going to be what we call a blue bottom installation, and then we'll touch on installation for units with a higher threshold than that. First step is just making sure that we have everything needed to have a successful install. That's with our supplied materials, materials that you're going to need to bring as well. And then checking for some of our conditions throughout the installation. We'll have some imagery throughout this presentation that will kind of go over all of these steps.
One of the nice things for anybody that's new, when you buy our product, everything that we require you to use comes in your kit. So you're not buying sundry items. You're not looking for things elsewhere, different stores that are compatible. Everything that we ask you to use, other than your basic tools, does come with our kit for you.
Thanks, Robert. First step in installation is really checking dimensional criteria, making sure your framing's level, making sure that your framing pocket will receive the unit that you purchased. So first step really is just doing some dimensional criteria around your framing pocket. We'll dive a little bit into the recess and drain location here in the next slide. The initial step with the subfloor is making sure that we have a level subfloor. So how we manufacture our product is we try to mimic the subfloor conditions through our manufacturing process to set a standard through all of our products. So if you have a level subfloor, you'll be able to install our product with ease. If you do have, a condition where a subfloor is out of level, we request that like a self-leveling compound went down to get that down to level. And we try to keep that within an 1/8 for low spots. Anything high can kind of deform the pan and get that out of level. So our spec on that is within 1/8 low and nothing high.
Hey, Bob, can you go back one slide, please?
You bet.
Wanted to point something out. So one of the nice things about our unit with how rigid it is, we have our 1/2 inch plywood within the walls, and the unit holds up pretty well on its own. But one of the mistakes that I catch a lot of people making is that they don't check, obviously all the walls, the pockets that it goes in are not perfect. We all know that. We've all been doing this for many years. It's not perfect. But what's really nice about our unit is you can pull the base out a little bit. You can push it in a little bit to where when your back wall lines up, it's perfectly flush. Because sometimes the wall's a little high on the top, to where it's out, or the bottom. So don't forget about, you can adjust this pan to where it does not have to be perfectly flush up against your back wall if you need to adjust it a little bit to keep everything plumb. So just a little tip and trick of the trade.
Thank you, Robert. Critical step here, when we see any issues with installation, I'd probably state that, 80%, 85% of the stuff that comes across my door for installation issues has to do with this step. So, if one thing that you could take away from this webinar, make a note of, is verifying the box out depth and the drain location. So, these pans to meet the threshold height and slope requirements around this area, we're actually below grade of the subfloor. So that's why we require that box out so the pan can continue to slope to the drain. So, you know, not having that drain center can pitch the drain up, not having the box out at the correct, you know, 8x8, 3/4 depth, really puts you at a disadvantage to getting a good install. So, you know, if you take away one thing from this hour, I really hope it's this slide. And as I stated earlier, majority of the installation issues I see are in this step. And if this is done incorrectly post-installation for the product that we're going through, that requires you to, you know, remove the pan, you know, rip the glue out. It's a very costly mistake. So, you know, I cannot highlight this step as much as I can.
Hey, Bob, do you have a picture of the deflection of the bottom of our pans in this slide set?
I don't believe I do, but I can speak on that. Plumbing code, so regardless of product, plumbing code's bound to 150 thousandths of an inch of deflection post installation. So you know, regardless of product, all the installation methods are designed to achieve that threshold with deflection. So, you know, we've had our units tested, certified for several years. We've got to do that on a 5-year basis, and you know, the installation instructions are in mind to keep that deflection below that requirement.
Okay, appreciate that. And another thing, I've been on some job sites where they cut the box larger than 8x8. If you go too much larger, the problem that will happen is when individual steps on that drain area, it will actually create a little bit of sponginess. So you definitely do not want to go much larger than 8x8. I know there's special circumstances from time to time, or if you're on a concrete floor and it's cut out, you're going to have to add a little bit of mud set you know, around that area if it's larger than 8x8, because you will develop another problem that way going too big also.
Yeah, that's a good point, Robert. The one thing I can add to that too is the 3/4 inch depth is not a like maximum or minimum dead set 3/4. You need a 3/4 minimum, but if that was lower, you'd still be fine. Really, you just need enough support around there to keep the drain from, you know, sliding away from you too much. So, you know, if that went down an inch, inch and a half, you'd be okay. But the depth you just want to make sure is a minimum of 3/4. If it was, you know, it's over that's not a concern. It's just more the minimum there. All right, moving on. Before we're going to dry fit the pan, just, you know, some house cleaning steps here. Make sure that we have that pocket cleaned, no debris there. So when we take our measurements, we're getting true readings. You know, there's cases where screws can get down there or other debris that can throw off or pitch the pan in, you know, negative ways. So just a quick house cleaning step.
One of the other things, I'll point out as well, and our slides don't show this, but if you guys are needing help with having a little bit of extra depth for your pan, so you're meeting your floor substrates, our units can be put down right on the joist if it's a stick built. So you can go right down on your joist. You need the pad in between them, but you can set right on your joist if you need to be able to get your pan more flush with what your flooring substrates are.
Good point there, Robert. Moving on to installation, after we've, you know, cleaned the pocket, we're just going to do a dry fit. So before we, you know, glue the pan down and make that permanent, we just want to verify that our design intent is still intact. So we see the 4 levels on the perimeter there. Our products are all coming off a molded design, and all 4 of those on the perimeter should be level. That's both the 3 sheetrock ledges and that very front threshold should all be reading level. And then the level in the middle there, we just want to make sure that we've got adequate slope to the drain. The way we design our slope is kind of in quadrants. So if you look at that pan and you're cutting it into 4, you know, pie slice quadrants, I always recommend kind of taking your slope measurements across those lines to give you the best reading. Anytime we do, customer service or anything like that, this is always the first step we ask, is to put levels, in the areas that we can to get readings. And then we can kind of analyze, is this how the design intent was off the mold, and then helps us distinguish and troubleshoot in that manner. So, a very quick step to make sure your unit is going to behave as intended prior to, gluing it down.
And this goes back to my earlier comment in the beginning slide. Then this is where you'll pull out your 6-foot level on your back wall, making sure that you don't need to scooch the unit out a little bit or push it back in a little bit. This is where you would determine that as well.
All right. Moving on, we've got an image here, an assembly drawing of the drain that we supply here. It's just a brass caulkless drain. Very common in the industry. One thing I'd like to mention is, we have a fiber gasket that we supply on the backside of our drain. And that's right above the rubber gasket. That rubber gasket's roughly, 3/8 of an inch. In our manufacturing process, that backside of the pan, we try to make that dimension that mates to it to be 3/8 inches as well. So that way you get complete contact throughout that seal. So it's not just, a small grab there, like an eighth or something like that. We try to maximize that to mate to our gasket completely.
And one of the things, if I'm not mistaken, Bob, we're the only manufacturer that sands the bottom area where the drain attaches. That way guys aren't getting a bunch of fiberglass splinters in their hands when they're screwing in that drain. So that whole area is ground down and smooth. So to minimize at least, some of the fiberglass getting pricked by fiberglass.
Yeah, good point there. And, that's just a time constraint. It just takes longer to sand. But, for the end product, we just believe that given the full contact, I've seen it, unsanded. I've seen, maybe a 16th to an 1/8. That's all that's touched. So, just try to get this in the best place for the end user and installer. We try to make sure that that's a 3/8 of an inch to grab that full gasket. So after the drain's assembled, our units are adhered with an adhesive. It's a 2-part adhesive. So you get a chemical cure there, not a moisture driven or air driven cure. Image here is a warming bag. So if you have a cold environment, you can use these warming bags to help dispense the material. When you heat it up, the viscosity gets a little bit lower, helps it, apply out of, a battery powered gun or just a handheld gun there.
And I will tell you guys, if you don't have this stuff warm, your forearms will be like Popeye, if you can even get it out. I mean, this stuff is really thick and heavy when it's cold. I've even seen powder cock guns, break because the adhesive was too cold. So very, very important. If you don't have a warming bag, hot water bath in a 5-gallon bucket works as well. 10, 15 minutes just to get it warmed up, and it makes a world of a difference.
Yeah, just getting that to, room temperature, if you're storing it outside in cold conditions and then you bring it in and immediately apply it. Yeah, you're going to be in for some laborious installation compared to just trying to get that to a workable temp. So another best practice step here is, once again, I stated that our adhesive's a 2-part. Any 2-part adhesive in manufacturing, when they put the lid on there, some air can get captured in there, and that can inhibit the hardener. So, just for best practice, we always recommend before putting the static mixing tube on, just to purge a little bit out, make sure you're getting good dispension out of both materials. When you do this, if you have done it, you'll notice that one side will dominate the other just on the initial step. So just from a best practice side, we always recommend injecting just a little bit out of that to overcome that manufacturing issue that's in the 2-part adhesive. Once we've verified that, you're just going to put the static mixing tube on. We have a grid pattern that we call out for our low threshold blue bottom units. In summation, that's just, we're going to start 4 inches from one of the side walls, 2 inches above the threshold, and then we're going to, place indicators on a 6-inch by 6-inch grid. And then we also do at the very, box out of the unit, we're going to do a dollop on the 12, 3, 6, and 9 o'clock locations around that. One thing I recommend is, we're requiring a 3/4 inch dollop height. I recommend, if you have a piece of 3/4 to set down to give you an indicator. It's kind of tough to do by eyesight, as that is, kind of a conical shape as it's coming up. A little bit easier just to have a 3/4 inch piece to use as an indicator to give you your set height, and then from there you're able to go. The image here we have is just a handheld operating gun. Highly recommend investing into a battery powered option. You'll save a lot of time. You'll get that out quickly in a return. And then Robert mentioned, sometimes the tubes can break. Those tubes, that gun operates off a piston system. So if you don't make sure they're on the same plane, you actually end up twisting it. So if you do go that route, just be careful that when you're driving that piston, it's going down on the same path. But we're going to do those, 3/4 dollops throughout the process. Working times are on the tubes. They're both in English and Spanish, so you'll have some information on there. I don't expect you to memorize all that information today, but each tube is labeled with, working times and with different temperatures in 2 different languages.
And just to reiterate, that 3/4 height, you definitely want to be hitting it. I mean, if you're a little bit heavier than 3/4, that's really not a big issue once you put your weights on. But if you're not at 3/4, if you're just really doing a minimum of, I've seen some 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch, the problem is we're not getting that full bond. So the 3/4 inch is extremely important. We've done some warranties to where we've popped up some pans, and the adhesive, for whatever reason, was not put on enough. So very, very important, especially when you start putting your draft lines in, when you put your weights on, just to get proper adhesion.
Yep. Good point. Yeah, I've seen people try to trowel it on, or, get rid of the static mixing tube and try to mix it in place. Yeah, you're going to see a lot of unique things there, but yeah, that height allows for a good bond. And then also that house cleaning step, we want to ensure that we're getting any dust out. If, you're in an environment that's full of dust and you lay an adhesive down, that adhesive is going to bond to the dust and not your subfloor. So we want to make sure that we're getting, proper, adequate contact to the subfloor. So we're not bonding to, an unintended material. After we've created our grid pattern here for the adhesive, another trick or tip is to take 2 pieces of scrap wood, cardboard, any 2 pieces that would hold the adhesive, grab a little bit of it, and mate the 2 together. Once you put your pan in there, it's very difficult to check your degree of cure, but if you have that scrap piece with it, that'll give you an indicator outside of your actual install of how that adhesive is behaving. So if you're in extremely cold conditions, it's a chemical cure that's going to be susceptible to any change in temperature. This will give you an indicator to say, okay, this is where my cure is. Same thing if it goes in hot conditions, it's going to speed up a little bit. So recommend putting just a piece on the side that gives you an idea of what the cure is before you start stepping on it for wall installation or whatever your next step will be.
And typically, I tell everybody in normal conditions, because most of the time, you're not going to be on a commercial job. You're going to be in a residential setting, so the temperature can be, monitored. Give it a good 4 hours before you start playing with it, minimal. I know some guys try to speed it up a little bit, and you can, but just to be safe, when you're in warm conditions, give it at least 4 hours. And that's always a good set to, good rule to say, your pan is cured.
Yeah, good point, Robert. What happens in those cases is that adhesive, it hasn't cured yet, so it still has some memory back and forth. You pull your weight and you start bouncing on the pan, it'll actually kind of develop strands on the pan, and then when it does cure and you come back and sit on it or stand on it, you'll start hearing those, like a cracking noise where that adhesive is failing because you started, jeopardizing its integrity by, getting it to bounce back and forth. So yeah, just give it the ample time, and that way you don't have to run into that by, trying to go too quick. So we verified all of our dimensional criteria, slope criteria. We've got our adhesive laid down. We're feeling good about the contact that that's going to have. The next step there is just to adhere the pan down, and then do one more level check. This is just kind of a last check to ensure that we're getting the same dimensions and same readings that we had in our dry fit. You know, if something were to happen in this, if, you know, something was on the bottom of the base that, you know, got stuck to there that you weren't aware of or whatever, this would be a lot better step to pull it up. It would still be, you know, unfortunate, but it's a lot better than having that adhesive cure. So we're going to go by, take our measurements again, make sure that we're reading level on the threshold, all the sheetrock ledges, and then making sure once again that we have good and adequate slope to the drain. From there, we're going to place weight on the unit. As I stated earlier, you know, our units have those quadrants and lines. And so you can grab, you know, a piece of wood, 2x4, you know, and pitch those to the drain, place something that's going to distribute the load to those, you know, piece of wood, and then place weight on those, and then also place some weight on the front threshold. This is just really to help that compaction of the adhesive to the subfloor and make sure that, you know, over time, nothing's changing in that as you wait for that adhesive to cure.
Yeah, and sometimes, guys, I know you don't have the sand or the cement for the weight. A couple 5-gallon buckets full of water placed on top will do the same thing for you. So if you know you guys don't have that extra stuff to carry around, I know you guys always have 5-gallon buckets on the job site. Stack a couple of those up with the water in it, and it will do the same thing for you.
Yeah, yeah. Any substitute for dead weight will work. Whatever is readily available. You just want to make sure that you get enough weight to apply that force down. So now that we've waited for our time, you know, you could have gone to your test strip there that we pulled earlier, made sure that we had a full cure on our adhesive. We'd want to remove all the weight, and then we're going to go and pre-drill our units into the framing. I recommend pre-drilling. You can use Tech screws that are have the self tappers in them, but pre-drill is always just good practice. And then after we pre-drill, we're going to go through there with you know, a drywall screw. You know, if you're going into CMU or something like that, you just want to make sure you have the correct fastener if you need a concrete fastener or whatever. Also recommend not using impact guns. Some people can get a little excited with those and screw through, you know, all the way through our unit if they're not careful with that. So just be careful with using the right tool for the right job.
And another thing to emphasize, one of the other reasons I recommend pre-drilling, I know some guys like to avoid that step, but the fiberglass will crack on you. It is what it is. You know, it's a small flange, so it's easy to crack. Pre-drill so that it doesn't crack. And if your customer sees that it's cracked, then they're starting to think that their unit is bad. I've had a couple of people say, "Hey, my flange is cracked, and you know I don't want it." It's not going to change the integrity, but the perception from the client seeing that, you want to avoid that as well.
Good point, Robert. Now that we've got that fastened, we're just going to do our final drain assembly there. Make sure that our gasket wraps around, you know, whatever piping system you have, and then we're going to lock that down with a locking nut. I've seen some pretty interesting tools to get that done that they've been coming out with. That little locking tool there, that straight bar there, can get down that drain if you're not careful. So be careful with that. And then yeah, if you haven't seen some of the tools out there, they have to adhere these. Definitely investigate those, because it kind of gets rid of that step. I'm sure we've all been a part of an accident where that fell down the drain.
I'm telling you, there's probably not one contractor that has not dropped that down in the drain at least once. It always happens. For us old school guys, a little bit of duct tape on the bottom of that with your screwdriver through it works just fine, you know, if you don't have the tool. Because I will tell you, I have seen every time, especially new guys, they drop that down in there, and you're not going to be getting it out of that drain real easily. So a little piece of tape, or as Bob mentioned, you know, one of the tools that they have for those lock nuts is well worth the investment.
All right, so with that, we've got our base installation. One thing I'd like to go back to is at the initial part of the presentation, we discussed that this was, for our blue bottom install. We do have for thresholds 1.5 inches and taller. We actually use a wood core in that unit, and that allows us to meet the deflection code and also provides a quicker installation as you get away from a lot of the adhesive steps. That unit has a structural integrity to meet the code as is, where the lower threshold units, just due to slope and threshold requirements, we don't have the space required to get that 3/4 of an inch. And so we're transferring a lot of the loads to the subfloor, but the units with a taller threshold allow us to get a wood core in there. It makes for a quicker install. You're really removing a lot of the prep steps and the adhesive steps and the weight steps. You're just able to slide that in and fasten that to the framing, and then you're ready to go on your wall install.
Yeah, with the wood bottoms, do we have a threshold slide that shows all the different thresholds on this presentation?
I'm not sure if we have it on this presentation. I would say for majority of our units, that's going to be 1.5 and above will be
Correct.
wood bottom, and then below there's definitely a handful of outliers. So I can't say that across the board, but
Sure.
it's all just dimensional criteria with threshold height and slope that dictate that.
So one of the things to think about is when you're wanting to go with the wood bottom, obviously it's a much quicker installation because as what Bob says, you're not using the weight plates, you don't have the epoxy. These units can be set down on your joists as well. Again, you got a pad between your joists, but the reason why I bring that up is because then that changes the amount of height that you have going to your finished surfaces. So if you have the opportunity to be able to change to a wood bottom, it would definitely speed up your installation time. One of the other things that are confusing is I know because we do a lot of state programs, they ask for barrier-free units. Now, what does barrier-free mean? And that's where a lot of people get confused. So zero entry is where you have to be flush 100% with whatever your floor surface is. That's zero entry. Barrier free, you can have up to 1.5 inches above your finished surfaces. It's still barrier free, but it's not zero entry. So make sure when you guys are having your scopes that you're not misreading, or get clarification, because if they're just asking for a step-in barrier-free low threshold shower, you can get away with using the wood bottoms and speed up your time if they do not need a zero entry.
Thank you, Robert. Now we're going to move into our wall installation. We're just going to be focusing on our spring clip design, which is majority of the walls that we provide are going to be a spring clip design. What we're going with here is this will be a 4-piece wall system. In some conditions, we do have a 3-piece where that back wall is a single back wall. 4-piece is going to be a split back wall. Since all of our molded conditions, as I stated earlier, are going to be level on the threshold, the back wall is just going to play off of that. So we're just going to go off 2 molded level pieces, and that will be our index. So the back wall, we're just going to hang on that base, and then we'll be able to fasten that into your framing. That's all that's going to be required. Once again, you want to make sure that you're pre-drilling those and not cracking the unit. And then from there, we're going to go through our upper back wall. We do have some indexes to line those up. So we have some pins, and then we also have the upper back wall is pre-drilled to mate that. That is something that we do in our factory here, and then we also verify the locations of those. So they go off some fixtures, but then we also ensure the fitment's correct, that we don't have any drift with our alignment there.
So on this, I'll also add, things do happen from time to time. Sometimes the holes don't line up just perfectly. It happens for various reasons, not very often, but if you need to just pre-drill a hole on that backside and set it with a screw, no issues whatsoever.
Yep. Thank you, Robert. Yeah, if you need to do some troubleshooting there, it's pretty simple for those. And those pins are a rubber material, so it's not just like a steel pin. It does have some flexibility to move a little bit. So if it, something happened in shipping or whatever, that we'd be able to still mate those at the point of use. For the back walls, we're going to make sure that we still have, we're still achieving our level there, making sure that we're still indexing correctly and not drifting from that. Once we verified that, then the next step is pretty simple. We're just going to install those back to the framing, pre-drilling again, and then fastening that upper back wall. And then you can see on those coves to the left and right, those are going to be our spring clips that we're going to mate to. So that's how the sidewalls are going to slide in there, and those springs allow for some compression after we install those to keep them in place. One step that helps to keep those in place is we supply a construction adhesive. So this adhesive will keep that spring locked after the walls are in place. So, the design intent for that through the installation is just to put some dollops of that construction adhesive behind the spring. So once you mate your wall into there, that'll lock that in place. So, if there's any, drift or settling in the house or whatever, you're not going to have to worry about that moving it at all. It'll stay locked. Before we, install our sidewalls, if you have some plumbing or a plumbing wall on that side, we want to take measurements and pre-drill those. One question we get frequently is, what's the best place to take dimensions? On this picture, we'd want to pull those dimensions from left to right. That left side is indexed, that's the molded feature. That's going to be your true dimension. That right side has some geometry in it to allow for that engagement with the spring clips. So as we're looking to take dimensions on this, we want to make sure that we're doing that from the entry part of the shower, not the back wall part of the shower, just to ensure you get the correct dimensions. And once you start drilling into these, it's really hard to repair or go back from some of these larger holes.
I'm going to add one thing to that's slightly a little bit different. For some reasons, some of the guys, they measure from the face of the unit, and that's incorrect. If for whatever reason you're not 100% sure on your outside finish with where the wall is going to end up, you can measure from the inside of the C channel to be able to get that measurement as well. But if you're not measuring from the inside of that C channel and you're not, you will be off by at least an inch and a quarter. So you want to make sure that that is accurate.
Yep. And then, yeah, good point, Robert. And then, yeah, we just want to make sure that those dimensions are correct. Since this is a gel coat fiberglass, it is repairable, but we're kind of getting out of the realm of small repairs and moving into something a little more complex when you take a 3/4 inch hole saw and cut through it. So once we've placed that in there, we engage those spring clips into the side there. I always recommend doing those at an angle towards the inside of the unit to slide them in instead of going directly in. If you slide them in kind of at an angle, it's a little bit easier of an engagement to get those spring clips in, and then we'll just push that unit to the wall to the framing, once again pre-drilling and screwing those in.
Something else about going back to, and I forgot to mention this, when you're drilling with your hole saws for either the valve or for the shower head, I recommend also like some blue tape, flat taping it. One is, it's easy to mark right where you need it to be, but then it also helps from any splintering happening right around where you're cutting. So if you flat tape it before you cut, and same with doing a window. If you're cutting the back wall out for a window, flat tape everything. One is it keeps any of the marks from the saws from, leaving a little bit of a burnish on the gel coat. And then it also helps with any splintering on the edges where you cut.
Good point there, Robert. After our walls are installed, we just want to come back. You're going to get supplied with this matched silicone You're just going to apply those through all the seams. One thing to be careful of is our pans have a weep hole in them. So they're in the design of the back wall. I can kind of go back up there. We have coves here where that's sidewall is going to mate, and there'll be a seam right there. So, we've tried to put a fail safe for any leak prevention or, failed silicone. So how that would work if you have any of those issues, the water would go and be fully encased by the fiberglass in that back cove. It would drop, and then it would make its way to the weep holes, and that would be an indicator if you saw, any kind of water coming out of your weep hole, that you have an issue where, maybe the silicone failed over time, maybe it's settled and shifted. You'd be able to, reapply that silicone and then keep using that indicator from the weep holes if that problem was fixed. When you get water behind the unit, that's never a good thing, nothing that, we'd ever want to see, but we put a fail safe in our design to give you an indicator, because without that indicator, you're going to see, drywall swelling or, subfloors rotting, a lot more expensive fixes compared to getting that early indicator through those weep holes. So the weep hole is just a little divot in the wall edge of the pan. When we're applying our silicone, we want to make sure to avoid that and keep that fail safe intact in that indicator.
A little trick, as I've taught a lot of our guys, is if you keep some Q-tips with you, slide a Q-tip into the weep hole area and then caulk up to either side. That way you know that you're not filling that hole even by the slightest bit, because that Q-tip will keep that area clean.
I like that trip. I've never heard of that one before. All right, with that, we've finished our installation of a blue bottom unit. We've also discussed a little bit about our wood core options, and then our spring clip design for wall installation.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Do have a few questions that have popped in throughout the webinar. First, how do you apply adhesive if you are applying the base directly to the floor joists?
As I mentioned, you have to pad in between. So you still have, instead of the subfloor being on top of the joist, you're padding in between the joists. So, and there's different ways of doing it. You can put cleats down and then set your subfloor in between the joists. It's called rapid recess. There are joist hangers that you can put onto your joist and then put your plywood in between. But so you still have a solid surface, but you're just now below the surface of the joists.
And I've worked with that rapid recess before. I can't remember the cost of it, but it was a really slick design on, if you're needing that extra height, then you don't want to build your subfloor up, or if you need to recess it, that was a pretty slick way of going about it. Provided a good install, and then allows you to go right to the joist, and then you're just kind of staying on the same plane with that, with a cleat. And then I think that required like a 3/4 inch piece of wood. I don't know if you know, Robert, off the top of your head.
They have 5/8 or 3/4.
Okay, yeah, it was a pretty slick way to go
for you.
have to go
And yeah, so you're in good shape, and you can buy those on Amazon easily as well. I just noticed that over the last couple of months they were selling rapid recess on Amazon. Again, not very expensive, and a huge time saver as well.
All right. And are there any special requirements for the flange screws?
No, we recommend drywall anchors if you're going to go into wood, but as I stated in the presentation, if you're going to CMU, then you just want to make sure whatever your fastener is going to, the correct fastener is used to the structural member there. So if that's wood, you can use a drywall screw, you could use a wood screw there. And then if you're going into any kind of masonry, then you want to make sure you have the correct fastener for whatever that's going to be biting into.
Okay, and you guys did mention that we have what we call a blue bottom versus a wood bottom pan. And then, mentioned that the threshold height is really what's the difference between the two. How would someone know if they could use a wood bottom versus a blue bottom? What are the conditions that they're looking for?
One of the little tricks of the trade is pull out your register vent. So if there's not a access panel behind it, because you're typically pulling out a tub shower, or a standard shower, If you pull up the register vent, if it's on the floor, a lot of times that will show you how much substrate is there before the joist. The other way, sometimes there's a threshold in the front of the bathroom, going into the hallway. You can pull that up to see what they have there. Sometimes it's a little bit of a guess, because we don't know what each homeowner might have done themselves or what the previous contractor did. But I found the floor register vent to be a pretty good source of, trying to see how much height you have of buildup on top of your joists.
Righty. And what are your tips or tricks for leveling a concrete floor?
One of the ones that I've done a lot, so you have your self levelers, but a little trick is if say you're a half inch, 3/8 of an inch out somewhere, put a shim down, glue it to the floor, use some type of fast drying adhesive, glue it, then put your underlayment down, because then your liquid underlayment, you'll have a perfect level of right to where your shim is. So you're using that as a gauge for when you're applying your floor leveler. Something else that's very important with your floor leveler, make sure you know what the cure times are, because some of the cheaper products are requiring a 24-hour cure time before you set our adhesive down. And so really pay attention to that. Some of them are as soon as 15 minutes. So make sure you read your package on your floor leveler, because the adhesive will not bite to that until that's cured.
Yeah, and then there's primers and stuff like that. We've used a handful different there, but yeah, there's, any Home Depot is going to have a lot of options. I did want to go back to that question on the threshold height. Sorry, I lost connection there for a second, but from an order entry side, just to give you like a standard there, if you're curious, when does the wood bottom switch to blue bottom? It's really when the sizes get larger. So anything, 60/30 to 60/36 or 60/36 and below, you can stick with a 1/5 rule. Anything 1/5 and above is going to be a wood bottom. But if you need those direct answers, anyone from your rep to inside rep will be able to provide that exactly for each product. If you do have those questions, you don't need to know our product that well. We'll be able to provide that for you.
Awesome. And there were a few questions on water pooling or the pan not draining. What are some of your troubleshooting tips?
I would say for me, 90% of the time that I see water pooling is back to that initial critical step I discussed about the recess in the drain location. Anytime I see that's our first go-to. How we go about that is case by case. There's dependent on, the unit and the situation, what we can get away with, since, each of those, if it's a misstep that way, it's not going to be, a simple solution for each. It's a case by case, and that goes from, increasing water containment or to points where we have to, rip the unit out and replace it. And, rip it, change the box out, change the drain location, or fix the drain location and replace it. It definitely varies on a case to case.
One of the things that I see a lot of, sometimes the plumbing is not quite where it's supposed to be. And so guys will kind of push the pipe a little bit. And if you have to push your pipe, what's going to end up happening is then you're causing that center of that pan to be pushed up a little bit, which will cause that puddling as well. So you got to make sure that when your plumbing is there, that it's not being flexed too hard to where you're putting upward pressure on your pan. I've seen that way too many times, and it's a simple fix. Sometimes guys just don't want to mess with the plumbing at all, and I understand that. But you put too much pressure on that pipe, you will cause our drain area to set up a little bit high, which will cause the puddling around the drain area.
Awesome. Can you talk about finishing over the nailing flange? So I imagine
there's
some options for finishing.
Sure. There's two simple solutions to that. One is you can just drywall right over top of the flange, right to the unit, and you flat tape it and finish it off just like you do anything else. Or we have a trim kit. Our trim kit is designed, it's a 3-inch, So it gives you a lot of play of the old unit that you cut out versus the new unit. And we do have on our videos, we do have installation of our trim kits, and it's done well. And so then that way you don't have any mudding or patching to deal with.
All right, and what is the biggest install mistake you see in the field? And how to avoid it?
Yeah, I can speak to my side. It's the box out not being done correctly, or the floor being out of level on spec. And both of those are, making sure that you're doing the instructions to, following those quick, simple steps, making sure dimensional criteria is correct. That the box out and not being done correctly, I cannot stress that enough. And that is just a quick check. And make that part of your procedure. When you see those installation instructions, be aware that needs to be done correctly. That is by far the biggest mistake that I see in installation. Robert might see something different, but what hits my desk anyway is that misstep.
No, I would agree with you. That's probably 80% of the problems is that box out. The other thing that I do see a little bit is guys mismeasure. As we were talking about drilling your holes and making sure you know where your valve is, making sure that you're measuring from your right spot, because again, when that wall slides into that pocket, you have a little bit of play. So I do see that. And then the last thing is, which I brought up in the beginning, sometimes that they forget that the back wall out a little bit high. And I mean, I see that a lot. So what that's going to do is where your two it's going to leave a slight protrusion where those two walls hit, because you're screwing that back wall in either too tight or you're shimming it, to where that all could have been avoided if you brought out that pan properly, whether you needed to scooch it out a little bit or push it back in. So your pan is your most critical state. Once the pan's done, the walls go in like Legos.
All right, and then we have very specific manufacturing processes to avoid bowing, but there are environmental factors sometimes that we can't avoid. What are your recommendations to either avoid bowing in our walls and then possibly fix on site?
I can speak to that one as well. There is a little bit of warpage that happens for various reasons. I mean, we can sit here all day and talk about shipping and whatever.
I think Robert
Put it
froze,
back.
Bob. Oh, you're coming back.
What's that?
He froze for a second.
Oh, sorry about that. So if there's a little bit of bowing, turn the frame up or the wall upside down, put it on a soft surface or the cardboard that it came in. Put a 5-gallon bucket on the backside and let it relax for a couple hours if it's that much. But typically, if even with a little bit of minor bowing, you should pocket properly and up against the wall and screw it in and not have a problem. I've been playing with these units for over 30 years, and I've had some that were bowed real bad just because of environment. And I was able to push almost 3/4 of an inch out of it, and there was zero cracking. So our walls are extremely durable. So, but if it's a little bit uncomfortable, turn it upside down, put a 5-gallon bucket on the backside of it, let it relax, and then install.
Great. Well, that concludes our questions. Do you guys have any final thoughts?
I just appreciate
the only thing is Bob mentioned a
attending.
few times.
Sorry, Robert.
Oh, sorry about that, Bob. It's all good, man. It's all good. But as Bob mentioned, your reps have the threshold profiles. We don't want you, having to understand every ins and outs of all of our product if you're brand new. We're here to help you and educate you and train you. So when you have questions or comments or concerns, please reach out to your rep and they'll be able to help you to, make the best decision possible.
Yeah, to add to that is, a majority of my team's time is spent supporting, requests like these. So we're always happy to handle these, especially when they're early on questions and how to put people in the best environment. And I do appreciate everyone for hopping on and taking the time to learn more about our installation. And if you have any follow-up questions, we're always happy to answer them.
Sounds good. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time as well.
Thank you.